My name is Paige Gross. I'm the lead reporter at Technically Philly, and it has been quite a year. I'm sure you can all agree with me. Like Chris and Vincent said in the main stage, we normally would be having this conference in May, and it would be in person. But as human resource and leadership at your companies, I'm sure change is just happening. We're learning to adapt. So this panel will be talking about how human resources is kind of giving way to people operations and the employee experience. And now we're kind of going to talk about how large organizations can listen, respond, and adapt to employee needs, especially in this crazy year. And we'll talk about kind of real case studies and real examples. So like I said, my name is Paige Gross. I'm with Technically, but I'll give you guys a chance to kind of introduce yourselves too. Go ahead, Lloyd.
I'll go first. Okay, so good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. Paige, it's great to be doing something with you again, and thank you and everybody at Technically for having me and for SAP, and it's great. Looking forward to the discussion today, Michelle and Sarah, with you. My name is Lloyd Adams. I am the Managing Director of the East region for SAP, based in Newtown Square, which is our North American headquarters. We're a German company in pretty much every part of the globe, and it's really, great to be here with everybody today. Thank you.
Awesome. I guess I'll go. We'll go alphabetical order. So thank you guys so much for having me and Power Home Remodeling. We love our partnerships with Technically, so this is great, and we're excited for this conversation. I'm actually the head of communications for Power. We're the nation's largest exterior home remodeler, which you may ask why we're at a tech conference, but we actually do all of our own development in-house and have a tech team of over 100 people that operate our CRM and all of our business operation functions. So tech is really near and dear to us, and we really consider ourselves a tech company. So really looking forward to this conversation.
Great.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. Sarah Harris with Intercom. Really happy to be joining the conversation virtually, connecting with all of you. Intercom is an audio entertainment and media company. We're headquartered in Philadelphia. My role is social impact. So everything that I'm charged with within Intercom is how to look at our business and our platform and the ways that we connect with people and use it to both drive our business and drive social impact and connectivity with our people and our communities. So really excited about the day that we have ahead and our conversation now just about how we maybe work more purpose into our workplaces.
Got it. Yeah, that's really apt, Sarah. I feel like that's what a lot of our conversation is going to center on. Starting with that is, 2020 has been quite a year. We are all at least 6 or 7 months into working primarily remotely. No sure end in sight. And so I'd love to know, we've adapted to this remote culture. What do you think is not going back to normal when we are, have that option of finally going back to the workplace once it's safe? What is not going to return to normal?
Oh gosh, who wants to go first? I'll go. It's a great question, Paige, and I think for us at SAP, the good news is we felt rather fortunate, especially relative to so many other small and mid-sized businesses and other across various industries and how adversely impacted they were by things. At SAP, we were pretty fortunate in that we had already started to see many benefits of having a flexible working environment, both in terms of location and hours. And we did have a lot of programs in place for several years, things like Flex Appeal that would allow our employees to work non-traditional hours. And even before COVID, about a third of our 30,000 or so North America-based employees worked remotely. So even with that, when everything hit, back, in the February, March timeframe, and when we made the decision, like so many others, to close our doors, and we became, 100% virtual, literally overnight, it really, knock on wood, it went a lot more smoothly than I think any of us had anticipated. Many were already working remotely. Others are likely going to make the decision to continue doing so until this, public health pandemic is handled. And then there's others, of course, that are really, chomping at the bit to return to offices.
Right.
And we are starting to see a gradual, resuming of that safely and controlled, of course. I think when all is said and done, though, and we come through the other side of this, work in an office environment as we knew it before is going to be changed. And I think the mix of, in-person and virtual is going to be much, much higher than it was, prior to all this happening, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it will be different.
Yeah. Do you mean like the physical office will probably change the layout and, where people congregate, all that?
Yeah, and even the need for, I think, how much space we'll need, the manner in which we, engage with clients and partners. I don't think that, face-to-face will ever go away, but I really do think that one silver lining, at least for us, has been, reimagining the need for so much travel and so much face-to-face. And I think we've all really pleasantly surprised ourselves the degree to which you still can conduct a lot of really important and impactful business, even under such constraints.
Yeah. Michelle, I know that Power Home Remodeling loves their office. Like, we're proud of it. So I'm sure it's been a really difficult change. And so to kind of bounce the question back, what is not going back to normal about Power Home Remodeling's kind of work structure once we return?
So I will say, although we have a very young company in terms of age and very young CEOs, we're a little old school when it comes to the office and our love of like the physical space. So for us, the office is not going to be dead. Like, we're not going to shrink our footprint. We actually are expanding it and taking over even more square footage to build a tech hub next year that should be launched in around March. But I think similar to what Lloyd said around travel and meetings, I don't think anyone's jumping on a plane for a 4-hour working session now. I think it's like, okay, that's something we could do over Zoom or digitally in a way that's collaborative and appropriate. We've also seen huge efficiencies when it comes to training. So training used to happen in each of our 16 territories, done by the local vice president. And now what we've realized, we can nationalize some of that training. And so how can we, save the local vice presidents some time so that they can do more mentorship, they can do more shadowing, they can do more hands-on learning. So what of those things can we kind of dial up into more of a national virtual session that is allowing us to actually be a lot more efficient? So, we see more of the virtual training and definitely a little bit less on the travel outside of our kind of big events, which we do in order to kind of bring the company together. But for us, I do not see us moving to, shrinking office spaces or anything like that. Like, I think it's still going to be a cornerstone of our culture. And, there will be some flexibility. Like, I think our CEO was talking about, if you're going down the shore for the weekend and you want to work from the shore on Friday, I've seen how productive you guys are. Like, you could do that. That's great. So, I think there's going to be some of that, but I think we're going to try to push to have, everyone in the office as soon as it's safe.
Yeah. And Sarah, I know as tech companies, initially in our reporting, we heard a lot of like, tech is very much like accustomed to the option of work from home, but it's very different once it's forced upon you. So kind of as a large tech company, what was that like for you?
We were a lot like what Michelle and Lloyd are saying. We knew conceptually that we had some of that capability, but we had not relied on it 100% the way that we all of a sudden began to in the middle of March. And it was transformative, really, for how our teams connected with each other and really used that technology as a way to keep close and keep connected, and allow it then over time to really transform how we think about running our business. And we're excited now because I think it's showing us that this moment of great disruption on so many levels, it allows you to really step back and question how you do things and why you do things. And if you could start over and re-engineer it as we are in a lot of ways, how would you do it in a way that keeps you true to the essence of what you do? And we are a very locally connected media company in our communities across the country. So how do we stay true to that, but really deliver it in a different way and allow that technology to foster, deeper local connection to our communities, greater teamwork, like Michelle was saying, with working Zoom sessions, like we are working better across geographic boundaries than we had been before. And then there's this whole piece of trust and communication that has gone up because we are working independently and at different hours, but there's a camaraderie that is developing within it. So I think we're leaning into the opportunity that this disruption is creating and letting it transform both our people and our business as we go.
Yeah. So this year has not only brought us a very challenging global pandemic, but it has also brought a lot of other, what we kind of call big stuff. Like we're talking about the 2020 election, which could be the most contested, controversial election in a really long time. We're talking about, a huge movement of racial equity. We're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands of people losing their jobs. How do you focus on the big stuff, and how do you kind of approach those topics with your team, and how do you make sure that you're not coming across and just saying, oh, we're talking about it because we know we're supposed to talk about it? I know that can be a challenge sometimes if you're trying to reach thousands of employees. How do you make that feel genuine? So kind of how do you tackle the big stuff that's happening this year as well?
I mean,
yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'll just jump in on that. But I think for us, there's this juxtaposition, and I hope this speaks to folks that are watching today too. There's an interesting mix of we are human beings inside of organizations, and we are organizations as entities within a community. And so we're being called to a higher level of responsibility and accountability, both as individuals and as organizations. And I think there's this really great opportunity at both of those levels to say, who are we as a company? What are our values? What is it we really care about? And then what are our greatest strengths as an operator? What is our business strength? And how do we bring those two things together and really take that honest assessment of like, where are we and how can we show up in this moment in a way that's true to who we are, plays to our strengths, and allows us to really make a big difference in a meaningful way. And then it's not a talking point. You're actually living out something that's very real and very authentic.
Yeah. And I would love if you guys could get as specific as possible, kind of talking about the actual decision-making process you had to make and actual steps that followed.
Yeah, maybe I'll touch on that and maybe through the lens of, social injustice and racial equity first on that topic, maybe before hitting, election and some other things. But in terms of, I love the phrase showing up, right? It's not just about one time, right? It's about a sustainment and really, I sometimes feel that words like empathy and purpose have a tendency to be overused. But if you think about it, what we're seeing unfold, especially here in our country over the last 6 to 9 months, those words have never been more important. And so for us, on the racial equity front at SAP, the first thing we tried to do as empathetically as we could was just acknowledge the pain and grief of many of our employees that were impacted by this. And, on top of, some of the, as you would expect, initial announcements that were coming out from leadership and so forth, we really tried to make sure that we sustained, putting our money where the messaging is, if you will. One of the things that we did was we brought in some outside experts, right, to help contextualize the experiences of people of color. We hosted a 3-part series over the course of the summer called Stress in Communities of Color in the Time of the Pandemic, led by a gentleman by the name of Dr. David R. Williams, who's a professor of African American Studies at Harvard. And it was really insightful, right? We acknowledged that we needed some help and expertise to kind of help us through something that many of us are not expert at all. On top of that, SAP, we were in a fortunate position to be able to pledge some rather, significant amount of money, millions of dollars to help fight, and end, injustice and create, more of the world that we want. And as part of that financial commitment, we were also able to partner with an organization called the Global Citizen for the Unite for Our Future campaign, which calls on citizens and businesses and government and the social sector to tackle a lot of this stuff and to kind of create strength in numbers, right? Because as much as any one organization, no matter how big they may be, wants to tackle this, there's only so much you can do, regardless of the size of your organization. Two other things that I'll mention, just for ideas. We, through the sponsorship of our Chief Marketing Officer, we launched a program called Spotlight Black Businesses, which is focused on assisting small Black-owned businesses in our various communities across the U.S. that has been impacted both by COVID, as well as the protests that have been caused by the social unrest. And then from an employment perspective, we made a bold statement that we said we want to actually really triple down on further increasing the diversity in our actual workforce. And so we made a stated mission to double the representation of African-American talent in the US within the next 3 years. So that includes, stuff that we'll do on our own accord through our HR and recruitment machine, but also partnering more tightly with organizations that develop talent pipelines from underrepresented communities. So those are just a few things, Paige.
Thanks for sharing.
That's
Michelle,
great.
I know I asked the question a long time ago, so I can.
No. Don't worry. I got it. But for us, we're really lucky in that we started our cultural diversity and inclusion program about 3 years ago. So it wasn't like, okay, this happened, and so now we're going to jump on it. We've had some groundwork that was done, but there was obviously still more work to do, and that started really with listening. So our CEO actually had a town hall. Working with some of our folks throughout the business, and really just, wanted to listen and learn and hear from our Black employees and what their biggest challenges are, ways in which we can help, how can we listen, how can we be there for them, how can we amplify their voices. And out of that session, there was a couple things that we changed. So at Power, we actually deal with the general public every single day. So we're out in communities, and that means we deal with law enforcement. And for some of our Black employees, that is a very nerve-wracking and can be a scary thing for them. And so we implemented a buddy system where all of our employees are always in pairs, so that if there is an interaction with a homeowner who maybe, has something to say, or, police, there's an opportunity for, there to be an ally there. We're also working on training on how to interact with police and how to be an ally for your other, colleagues in the field if there is an interaction. We also worked on amplifying Black voices. So throughout the company, we've had folks work on articles and videos and artwork, and making sure that we're sharing that and just talking about what their experience is, what they're feeling, how they're getting through this, so that way we can make sure that our other employees can build some empathy and understand kind of where someone's coming from. And similar to you, Lloyd, we also, are looking to increase our diversity. And this actually just 2 weeks ago, we launched Strive for 35, which is a new referral bonus for our employees who refer people from underrepresented demographics into the company. So they actually receive an additional referral bonus for, continuing to help us diversify our employee base and kind of and that's all starts with, a diverse candidate pool that allows us to kind of pick the right folks for the company. So, it's been a lot of work. It's been something that I think listening has been really critical to making sure that we're making decisions that our employees feel like are authentic and are actually what they want to hear. Versus us just saying, this is what we want to put out in the universe. So it's definitely been a learning experience and, something that we've really been pushing. One quick other thing on the election front, that's also been kind of something that's really near and dear to our CEO's heart. So we actually launched this year, Power the Vote. So we're actually, working on an entire campaign for our employees to register to vote, to get out to vote, to volunteer at the polls. We've actually given Election Day off as a paid holiday. And if you volunteer, then you can get paid for the volunteer hours as well as, your normal day off. So, really trying to support those conversations in a way that people can be civil about it, but also just, supporting that voting message for sure.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I know that, a lot of companies thought we have our D&I initiatives down pat, everything's fine. It often takes an unfortunate event or series of events like the entirety of this year to kind of force those very real conversations. So I'd love to know kind of how have you been having those conversations with employees? How are you checking in? How are you hearing feedback? And is that what is kind of helping you implement these changes like you just talked about?
We did two specific things this summer, new to be more in the moment and more engaged with our team. And one, we established a DEI task force that allowed employees to create listening channels for other employees. So we identified folks in different roles in different markets around the company and elevated them and said, listen to your peers and colleagues and kind of be that conduit of information back and forth. And then we also set up an anonymous email box that if people wanted to voice concerns or say this is something that's troubling me or we need to address it, or hey, I have an idea, that we could ask, there was a place to submit that. So those are two specific ways that we are fostering that dialogue internally. And that is 100% shaping a lot of the campaigns and actions that Michelle and Lloyd were touching on that we're doing as well.
Was the ability to kind of have an anonymous way to kind of put thoughts or opinions forward something that you heard from employees, Sarah, or was it that was something like leadership decided? Had you kind of heard like we want a way to kind of talk about what's going on, but not necessarily feel heat like personally because of it?
Yeah, we added that as a new layer. So the way that we're structured, we have lots of, I would say, open dialogue within our local and respective teams, but we wanted to open that up more broadly and believed that anonymity would help people speak more honestly. And we really wanted, we didn't want people holding back. We wanted the real truth of how people were seeing it and what they needed and how they felt to be shared so that we could really address it.
Do you feel people are using it to, I guess, its full capacity?
I think there's always room for more. There's always room to help people feel safe and to feel like they can express. And what's interesting is observing that feedback and creating some more channels for people. What our team is really looking for is more opportunity to connect with each other in these kind of virtual events. So we've had a number of town halls that you would think would be very potentially very sterile, or people would be afraid to speak out. And they have been very raw and very honest and really beautiful ways that have built deeper connection. But it's sometimes it takes the anonymous to give an idea that then nudges your leadership to say, okay, let's try something different and really like put ourselves into that forum and see what happens and allow people to show up that way.
Yeah. A lot of the, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I apologize. Just to build on that, right? About a year and a half, 2 years ago, SAP made an acquisition out in the market of a company called Qualtrics, which is a leading experience management platform, both to help organizations better pulse how their customers are feeling about what it is that they bring to market, and internally helping companies have a better pulse for how their employees are feeling about the company and everybody and so forth. And so when all of this really intensified earlier in the year, we had already been big internal users of Qualtrics, but we really amplified that significantly, and we completely reimagined what used to be kind of our annual employee survey into something that is much more iterative, and now we call it #unfiltered. And one of the things that in the aftermath of some of the tragic murders, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so forth, when things were really embroiled earlier in the summer, one of the learnings that came out of one of these unfiltered surveys is that in addition to some of the things that the company had been doing from a leadership perspective, we wanted to have more forums and town halls, kind of across the employee base. And so one of the things that was set up was a town hall where over the course of an hour, a number of our Black employees openly shared their experiences, how they were feeling in the moment and so forth, with our entire North American community. And the space that created and some of the things that have kind of sustained coming out of that event have very much informed some of the other efforts that we've been trying to lead that I mentioned earlier. And so I say all that to just underscore that the degree to which listening and feedback in a real meaningful way that drives action, I think can be really, really powerful. And it's unfortunate that it took, so many of these unfortunate events to enact this. But I do think when we come out of, all of this current stress and chaos, it will be a bit more industrialized in terms of how we do that, and hopefully a lot more proactive.
Yeah. After your mention, Lloyd, of the kind of tech solution Qualtrics that you've used in the past, a couple of questions are coming in from people who are viewing this session, and I'm going to mix kind of two of them together because they addressed, how do you kind of maintain person-to-person contact when you're not in the office? And also, can you kind of talk about how you create spaces for those transparency moments? So, Sarah, kind of like what you were saying about we open this anonymous email. So I guess I'll phrase it as, how do you maintain personal connection when maybe you have 1,000 employees and you're not seeing them every day like you would anymore? And kind of what is the tech that you lean on to make those connections happen?
Yeah, a couple of the tech platforms, which I suspect many people are using, GoToMeeting, Zoom, Microsoft Team Meets, Slack channels are a great way for some of the informal connectivity. So those are some of the tools and platforms we're using. And our teams have done more structured coffee and lunch and happy hour where we're going to create space just to talk and connect and literally just open the line and let people interact and share. And those have been really powerful. And I've seen them as large as 200 people and as small as probably like 7 to 9 people sharing. And those have been really good for some of the emotional and empathy building and conversations. But then I would say on a normal sort of day in, day out, managers with their teams are also doing like standing, it's almost like office hours. And you turn on the camera and you tell your team, I'm here from 9 to 10, and people just pop in and check in on what's happening. And it creates that sense of walking down the hallway or popping into the office.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, we, all of what Sarah said completely resonates, and we've been doing a lot of that, and just maybe a few incremental things. She mentioned the lunches and the happy hours and virtual coffees and so forth. We've also been extending it to other building things, either internally or with certain clients, and that can be in the form of virtual workouts, virtual Peloton rides. Like, I have a team that was, they did a cooking class with one of their clients. Because she was new to the account and she was looking for some ways to kind of build some relationships when everything was virtual, and she got incredible feedback, and now they're doing it monthly. So I think it inspired a lot of creativity. I also, though, I think what it's also shown us is that you really also have to sometimes just do a check-in, because I think a lot of people, in the absence of other alternatives and activities, some people have become really even more workaholic than they may have been before. Yeah. And so there are times where you need to kind of, check and say, hey, obviously for this conversation, this technology helps because, we don't all know each other, and it helps to see. But sometimes, when you're just talking to a colleague, it doesn't have to be video all the time, right? And sometimes I always ask people on my team, hey, can I walk my dog while we have this conversation? Are we going to cover, you know what I mean? And so, because I do think we need to make sure that we're looking after each other from a health perspective, and the technology is great, but I think we, Michelle, I totally agree with the office environment, and you forget how much you just walked around and did other things, and the technology doesn't necessarily always enable that. So you have to kind of cut yourself from it too sometimes.
Yeah, my editor and I have turned our weekly check-ins that are usually just a half an hour. We go for a walk. So she walks around her neighborhood in West Philly, and I walk around my neighborhood in Northern Liberties, and we just chat. Awesome. We were like, we should probably go outside. That sounds like a good idea.
For us, we have an internal social network called Connect, which our team built. And so that's obviously a good communication channel, but similar to what everyone was saying, kind of, finding those opportunities to connect, more regularly. I think one of the things that we worked on was some programming. So similar to what Lloyd was saying around, we actually did a company-wide talent show where it was, a Friday night, and it was done really, really well, and people could tune in and vote. And there was actually like American Idol style voting that our team figured out how to do. I don't know how they did it, but those types of situations and speakers and sessions where people actually feel like they're getting a stronger connection because they're missing the office environment. But what we also have seen with that is it actually has helped people get their families involved. So with some of those programmings, like the workouts or sessions with, speakers, like we had, Roger Clemens speak to the group and whatnot, significant others, parents, children are tuning into those things. So it's actually allowing kind of the family of the employee to actually build a stronger connection with Power, which has been kind of something that we didn't expect, and has been really great to see. So, that's been really important. And the other aspect, which I think is a little bit different than some of the other panelists talked about, was we actually utilize social media. So we have a Life at Power Instagram account, and we're utilizing that for, challenges, show us your workspace. What is your intention for the week? And, can you, do these different things? And what we've seen is that there's actually been like a growing community forming on social media where it's like, okay, I ran 3 miles. Now you run 3 miles. Or, this morning I'm going outside and having that coffee and not sitting at my desk. Like, show me your outside photos. And it's just helped our people connect in a way that, is a place that they're already living on anyway. So it's kind of been able to reach them where they are.
Yeah. There's a couple of tech options like Slack plugins or maybe Microsoft plugins, whatever, you guys use, that kind of randomized connections between employees. There's one I know called Donut. We've covered a startup called Swirl that kind of takes Slack users, and maybe you add a couple of interests that you have, and then Slack will, that plugin will kind of randomize and say like, okay, you guys love to watch Real Housewives, talk about that, and go get coffee once a week or whatever. Are you guys researching things like that? Or I guess, you kind of talked a little bit about the tech ways that you're using, but do you feel that that's more important now that you can't see people in person to kind of facilitate those non-work related connections between employees that they would probably have while they're, getting coffee in the morning anyway?
We're definitely seeing it at SAP. So our HR platform is a tool called Success Factors, and within that, there's a social collaboration tool called Jam. And what had primarily been used more for corporate or work purposes, we now see Jam sites on any number of topics. Most of them, I think, now kind of more on the personal, kind of off work front. Yeah. And to your point, really helping to kind of just connect, like-minded individuals into these different pockets and communities. It's really cool, right? So it's inspired collaboration, not just at the U.S. North American level, but for us globally, which is really neat.
I would say our team is doing a lot of the same that are employee generated. I mean, we've got different groups forming on different platforms around their interest areas, and coming together and building their own, whether it's a workout group or a virtual cooking class. Like, those things are happening organically, which is really fantastic. And I think it helps keep that team spirit happening. It's not as much randomized as what you're talking about. I think it's more interest and people who have connections. The other thing I would say is, just because we are, like many companies, dispersed across the country, there is a deeper connection because we're on video so much with people that we used to talk to on the phone all the time. We had no idea who they were. Yeah. And we're video camera right into their living room. We're getting to know their families, and like, there's a really good depth that's coming out of that with people that you knew, but you only knew them in one dimension, and now you're getting to know them on a deeper level.
Yeah.
I think for us, we're about to hold our first company-wide virtual event in November for our Veterans Initiative. So it's a leadership conference, and we are looking at like, okay, so how do we create the coffee break that normally happens where you grab the person who works out of the Atlanta office and you're like, hey, how's it going? What's working for you? You know, I'm having this challenge. So I think we are looking at some of the platforms like the one that we're on right now to like enable that sort of networking. But I think the other thing that we're doing, which is not maybe exactly what you're talking about, but for instance, our chief sales officer is like hysterical and very funny, and people love him. And he actually is just popping on Zooms. Like that is like his thing now. He'll just show up at your sales meeting that's like 4 people, and he'll be like, hi. And our employees are so excited to have a chance to connect with him and ask him questions or have him kind of, you know, get them excited for the day. So he's been just popping. It's been like, where in the world is JD? And he's just been popping on different Zooms, whether they be happy hours or, you know, kickoff meetings for small groups and large groups. So I think that's been kind of really fun, is like how accessible our C-suite has been able to be. Because it's all virtual. They can just say, you know what, I have 15 minutes. Let me see what meeting can I jump in? And so that's been kind of a way for our employees to really build connections with them who may have been, you know, a little bit harder to build connections with.
One question that just came in that I think is really interesting. Thanks, Kat. Kat, our partnerships manager at Technically. She said, if there are positives coming out of all of this, is it safer blurring the lines between work and personal life? I think that it's helping to foster trust, but there's also the risk that it could lead to, you know, betrayals or people not actually following through on their end. But there is an opportunity for HR functions to kind of play a role in that critical trust. So yeah, you know, your employees are probably facing challenges they've never faced before. Their kids are trying to do virtual school from home. Maybe they're taking care of their relative for the first time. So there's a lot on the table, like flexible work schedules. And, you know, maybe like Chris said at the beginning of the session this morning, you know, maybe you're doing work at midnight. You're not working till midnight, but maybe you're doing work at midnight because that's just what works for you. So how have you guys navigated that challenge of saying like, what our employees' needs are different than they've ever been before? How do we just trust them? Do we say, do what you've got to do? You know, how did you kind of navigate that in the first couple of months of the pandemic?
Go ahead, Michelle.
I think trust is just critical there. And I think trust has been built. I mean, since March, and just seeing the output of different teams and just seeing how well they're working has built that trust that I think will continue to go forth. I think what we're trying to do is also just make sure that we're avoiding burnout. You know, even on our technology team, which is obviously really great at working remotely, they've done that before. Their output has been sky high, and we've actually had to say like, okay, I know you can't really travel many places, but I need you to take some time off. I need you to take some PTO. Like, you need to protect yourself from burnout. You know, it's one thing if you're working at midnight because you didn't work a couple hours during the day, but it's different if you haven't left your computer. So I think just giving our people tools to recognize like, okay, when to turn it off and when to turn it on has been really critical. And just for us, just continuing to monitor what that output is. And obviously a lot of our teams work on Agile, so it's easy to kind of see, you know, how that's working and what's happening there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like we've had zero issues with productivity. If anything, productivity's been through the roof. For us, it's really been, and I think this surprised all of us. It did me. The monitoring of people's well-being and mental health and burnout and overwork. And in the beginning it was tough because, like I said before, in the absence of other activities, I think people needed that. But then as the weather turned and so forth and started to come back a little bit to normal, it started to taper off, but you still do see some individuals that are still pouring it on. And, you know, it's a fine line between, you know, intervening because they need some of that, but to really, you know, make a judgment call as to when someone is truly overdoing it. And that's been the biggest thing for us. And, you know, certainly no breakdowns in trust, certainly no dips in productivity, but definitely a very heightened level of vigilance for employee well-being.
Yeah.
To build on that point quickly, we have seen a lot of the same. Our leadership has led with gratitude and appreciation for the extra lengths that people are going to, not only just to work and get their work done, which is 100% happening, but also to keep up with family life and virtual school and a lot of other demands. One of our big platforms is mental health, and we have geared a ton of programming through our media outlets to our communities, talking about community mental health and creating space for conversations. It's all under the banner of I'm Listening. And this year, particularly from March onward, we have really used that emphasis on mental health to direct more programming in toward our employees, whether that's just leadership communication or actual resources, employee assistance programs, mental health and counseling, and really encouraging our team to take care of their well-being, access the resources they need, and communicate. If you need different technology, or if you just need to take some time off and take a breather with your family, take care of you first and foremost, and then everything else will follow from that.
Yeah. So we have a couple of minutes left. So I kind of wanted to round out the session. I started by asking you what is not coming back to normal when you return, but I'd love to know what you plan on taking from this time and implementing and kind of continuing to do what you found is really important that you've learned in this last couple of months that you will bring forward just to kind of be like a pillar of your company going forward.
Yeah. Who first?
Jump in on the big notes.
Yeah, I'll go. So like on a personal level, I think two things, right? You know, things like this sometimes make you really take stock of what's important and what you value, and how I think fortunate, you know, some of us are in terms of what we get to do, who we get to work with, both internally and with our customers and so forth. And so on so many levels, I'm dying to get back to the office. I'm dying to reconnect with so many of my friends at the company and so many of the great customers that I work with. But at the same time, you know, this pause, if you will, has made me realize, you know, we talked about it before, how much kind of over traveling and overdoing certain things I and other colleagues were doing. And you know, I haven't had this much time with my family really ever, right? And that's been amazing. So for me, when things, I don't want to keep working like this, but when things do kind of go back to normal, I think many of us will be a lot better calibrated moving forward than perhaps we were before.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I can build on that, Lloyd, in terms of keeping the balance for our employees. I think there's been some give and take on quality of life and really being purposeful about what elements we bring back and what we hold on to that allows our people to thrive at home and in the workplace in the new normal of what that looks like. The second big takeaway for us that I think is great is, I mean, we produce audio, and we have learned how to keep that close connection with our listeners and with our audience as they have gone through the journey of this year as well. And we've learned new things in terms of how to keep and foster that sense of connection and community. And I think that's informed our work. It's made us be more creative, and we will for sure keep that as we move forward, because it's core to what we do.
Yeah, I think, you know, for us, it's really similar. I think that we're going to take away some of the travel anecdotes of, you know, is that really necessary? A little bit more flexibility in the workplace, but then also just, you know, excited to come back. I think that's, you know, we survey our employees pretty regularly, and that is, you know, there's a lot of people who are really excited to be back in the office. So, you know, that's something that I think we're excited to, you know, have happen when it's appropriate, when it's safe.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Lloyd, Michelle, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. Really appreciate love to hear how companies are actually implementing these things in real time. Thanks again. And I'm going to shout out the next couple of sessions that our viewers are able to go to and yourselves. Starting at 10, we have what responsibility does the tech economy have for a just recovery? We're having a workshop on taking back your time, approaches for making work-life balance a little bit easier. And we have, I think that those are your two options for starting at 10. a third one. What corporates and startups can learn from each other. So if you see on the left side over in sessions, you'll be able to get those 3 there. But for now, stretch your legs, get a drink of water, and thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.